That's right, you geeks. Welcome into the Echo Screen, the official podcast of the Clan of the Grey Wolf. As always, I am your host, the Commodore, and Rue is still learning how to count down, but he's still joining me. Rue, how are you doing this fine evening?
Snowpocalypse, Linsanity, Patriots winning the Super Bowl again and again,
and we're only 5 minutes late,
and again.
So, on top of all that, it's good to be here with you folks.
Welcome
to the Echo Screen, as I said before. We are going to talk tonight about something. You know, we get pigeonholed into that whole nostalgia corner of the internet. I don't know if you're aware of this, Rue. That's kind of how people group us. You know, we look at old, like the old games and stuff, like the retro games. And
losers. Who would do that?
Losers. Yeah, who does that, right? Well, people that are kind of nostalgic in nature. Tonight, we are going to see what of those things that we loved when we were kids is actually just the result of nostalgia goggles, or if any of that stuff was worth a damn.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about Crystal Pepsi, so stay tuned.
We're going to be, we tipped it. If you watched it last time, we're going to be talking about Crystal Pepsi, so that's going to happen.
And maybe some Dr. Smooth.
And maybe even some Dr. Smooth, although we did have confirmation from a friend of a friend on Twitter since last show that the Dr. Smooth is not indeed still sold in Canada.
Damn it, Canada.
So we will not be importing any Dr. Smooth.
You're useless yet again.
Yes. What have you done for me lately? Or ever, for that matter.
I don't say the Death Star.
Close. All right. So, so we're going to get to that. But as we always do, we begin the program with a few news and notes. And I think we're gonna try our damnedest in 2016 to limit the constant cross chatter of the news and notes portion of the program, because we feel like that's kind of exploded. So we can focus more on the topic du jour, as we said, which today happens to be our nostalgia goggles. So let's go in with our new streamlined news and notes format.
Ciao!
There,
it was done. I hope you got it. You missed it otherwise.
All right. So I am going to talk about all the people that are dying.
All the dead people.
Wah, wah.
Happy News Day.
So, seriously, though, I tweeted about this. David Bowie, which, I can't tell you that I follow, like, David Bowie on a daily basis, because I haven't, but I don't remember there being any kind of announcement of him having cancer or any of these kinds of things. And
yeah, I don't remember that at all.
And he is one of those people that kind of you just feel like is going to live forever. He's not a person that you just, like how is Keith Richards still alive? Right?
Magic and drugs.
Yeah. It's got to be magic or pirate magic, maybe. Johnny Depp pirate magic. But he's still alive. And now David Bowie is dead. And that to me is very, very sad.
That's
but
not fair.
Within the last, week, we've lost Glenn Frey, we've lost Alan Rickman, we've lost David Bowie, Natalie Cole.
Yeah.
Man, the list goes on. But it just seems like these things kind of come in little packs and
well, it's just what people look for, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once a big death happens, so.
Out of that grouping, who would you miss the most?
Well, me personally, I respected David Bowie. I was never ridiculously into him, but Alan Rickman, that's like the one person I can actually do an impression of.
I feel an impression coming in.
Mr. Potter.
Yeah, you want to know what's funny?
My grandfather's hammer.
People look at Alan Rickman and they immediately turn to Harry Potter.
What a
I don't
savings.
do that. I think I only watched like 2 of the Harry Potter movies.
What is wrong with you? I got a lot of feedback after the last episode from people I work with who are like, "This guy you do this podcast thing with, is he insane? Does he have brain problems?"
I am insane. I never really got into Harry Potter though, and I so I don't think of Harry Potter when I think Alan Rickman. I think of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because he played the definitive Sheriff of Nottingham in that movie.
Oh, that's true, and he hammed up the crap out of that.
My God,
I gotta watch that again.
You know what? I caught the tail end of it because like all the channels are playing all these Alan Rickman movies, and I caught the tail end of the ending of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves the other day, and I just went, "Oh my God, he is brilliant
Mm-hmm.
in this role." Like Kevin Costner really can't do a British accent and is trying really hard. Alan Rickman is a great actor who's trying really hard to ham it up for a worthless movie.
He is like Jeremy Irons in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, that
Just
is
like
exactly what I was saying.
giant, grabbing giant pieces of scenery and chewing into it. It's delicious.
Yeah, he's insane. He's insane. But the Alan Rickman Sheriff of Nottingham will live on forever.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorites is I watched the other day. It was Galaxy Quest, which is just like it's hilarious. I have not gone to a Star Trek convention, and I have gone to Star Trek conventions quite a few, but I haven't gone in something like a decade. And but it's funny though is that like anytime people would ask, like it would almost eventually come up at some point whenever people were doing their like Q&A sessions, like actors from the shows, Star Trek shows, and people would be like, "Oh, what do you think of Galaxy Quest?" And almost universally they would be like, "It's way too true to life, and also the best Star Trek movie ever made." So,
wow, that's pretty interesting.
yeah,
like
it's just like the actors loved it, which probably shows you the cachet behind it. It's just like hilarious. Anyway, but that's also a wonderful movie.
Yeah. So farewell, all of the departed, particularly our friends David Bowie and Alan Rickman, who will be sorely missed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Have you figured out something you want to talk about yet, or should I make another one up?
Man, I still got nothing. You got anything else?
So
I came completely
got
unprepared with
so
news.
Somebody in the
bits,
in the chat. Here's where we can do a little sanity check on yours truly, and I'd love to know what you think about this. So someone mentioned this. Let's see. It's Mogo in the chat. As I listened to a podcast where Kevin Smith told a very touching story about Alan Rickman. Now, I don't know. I just recently watched, and I barely stayed awake for it, the documentary about the Kevin Smith written Nicolas Cage Superman movie.
Oh, Making a Murderer.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, not Making a Murderer.
Oh.
Making a Superman Murderer.
Oh.
Anyway,
wait, there's a I've heard him tell the story before, but there's
it's called like The Death of Superman Lives, I think, because the name of the movie is Superman Lives.
There's an actual whatchamacallit about it?
It's a documentary.
Documentary?
It's fairly recent. I'd say within the last year it came out.
Netflix has tons of original programming now. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Right, well, anyway, you're right. Not what I was going for here.
Oh, sorry.
So Kevin Smith was hired to write the first iteration of the Superman movie. He did. It was terrible. They fired him.
Yeah.
And then hired, I think, 2 different other script writers in order to finish the movie. And it's actually kind of scary because when you watch this documentary, you kind of go, man, this is a movie I would totally see. By the end of it, you're kind of like, man, this sounds pretty good. But it was never made, of course. So, but what I started to look at, like people talk about the Kevin Smith script and everything, and I've seen all the, a lot of Kevin Smith movies and everything. And I tried to watch Comic Book Man and some of the other things that he does.
Yeah.
Am I crazy to think that Kevin Smith might just not be very talented at anything?
I don't really like Kevin Smith. I mean, as a person,
he curses a lot. I mean, that's funny.
Actually, I was gonna say as a person he's fine, but I don't even know if he's fine as a person. I think he's highly overrated. Oh
yeah.
You know what I tried watching a few months ago when I was recovering from appendicitis, so I had a lot of free time on my hands and a lot of Netflix to watch. Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy.
I remember kind of liking it like 10 years ago, and I started watching. I was like, this is not good. And
it's not good,
and frankly, kind of offensive to like men and lesbians and comic book artists, and it's just like
I had a roommate in college who worshipped Kevin Smith, and basically forced me to watch Clerks.
Yeah,
and I thought Clerks was actually amusing. I enjoyed Clerks, but it's not like the greatest movie ever made, and people talk about Kevin Smith like he's made all these fantastic movies.
Man.
And I just don't get it. But anyway, watch the Superman documentary. It's not the intention, because this guy is trying in a kind of a good light. But to a certain extent, probably just isn't very good at what he does. Maybe that's why this movie never got made.
Was that your takeaway from the whole thing? Was like Kevin Smith's just not very good?
I'm telling. Other than the fact that I kind of wish I had seen a Tim Burton directed Superman movie. That was it.
That would be interesting. Okay, well, yeah, you know what? I think that's the perfect first thing to go into for our topic du jour, actually.
Exactly right. Because tonight, we're going to take a look back at some of these things that we thought might have been worth a damn before, or might have not been worth a damn. And we're going to look at them through nostalgia goggles. And we're going to take the goggles off, and we're going to see them in the cold, harsh light of day. And see if they're actually worth a dang. So, how do you want to proceed here, Rue? Would you like to present our first item for analysis?
Let's continue on with what we were just talking about because I think it's segues well. That's Kevin Smith movies.
Okay, here we go.
I can appreciate. Okay, Clerks obviously was Kevin Smith's big break. Like he basically committed credit card fraud essentially to rack up a bunch of bills he could not pay at the time to get the thing made. And all that put together, like shoestring budget, early 90s, you can be like, okay, yeah, I can appreciate this for what it is. Sure. The problem is that looking back, so I can totally give, and say, hey, you know what, that was totally influential at the time and even important maybe. Looking back now, and I've watched parts of Clerks now, some of it is just so cliche. Like the whole, no one thinks about the innocent people that were killed when the Death Star was blown up. Like that kind of thing has been done to death 6 million times. It reminds me on like YouTube, like 5 years ago, even, when YouTube was still relatively young, and it seemed like every other day you saw some new, realistic Mario Brothers, and it's basically just like Mario. There's some guy in a Mario costume, and he says like the F word or something. It's like okay. After
oh wow, this is great.
After 10 different types of these things, it's like I get it. Okay, it's funny because you're taking something that's inherently kind of kid-like or child for children and making it like R-rated. I get it. Same kind of thing from that. Anyway, going past that in the Kevin Smith's other movies, which most people I would say really like, at least the ones from the 90s.
Yeah.
I like I said, you look at it today, Chasing Amy, which most people would say is probably one of his best movies, is just amazing with like the not homophobia, but the tropes of what gay people and lesbians are like and how men react to them. Like
they're stereotypical.
There's like the point where I was just like, okay, I'm out, was there was like a super gratuitous like 5-minute kissing scene in a lesbian bar with two girls, and the two male leads are like one of whom is Ben Affleck, which is kind of funny. It's like so shocked, and they're just like, what? And it's just like, oh my god, this is not good. This is really
really heady stuff. This is really making. So, and that's kind of why I don't like Kevin Smith, because to a certain extent, he, like with the Death Star rant you were talking about, like it seems as if he's trying to be a little Quentin Tarantino-ish, where like people opine these things and they're like sitting there talking and it's very heady, and then they move on to something else and there's something meaningful about that in the plot of the movie. There's none of that in Kevin Smith. It's almost like he's trying to do that and just completely misses it.
Yeah, and even my favorite probably of his movies, which is Dogma, I actually was watching part of the other day. And it's like, this is still pretty good.
Yeah.
At the same time, some of the dialogue is really clunky. Unfortunately, some of Alan Rickman's dialogue is really clunky and like very un-Rickman-like. And I'm like, this could have been better. So I am going to put forth as the first to be judged Kevin Smith movies. Nostalgia goggles? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, nostalgia goggles
does not hold up. Anyway.
Well, what movies does Kevin Smith make now?
Garbage, generally, from what I understand.
Yeah, and I think that's why he's doing. Yeah, well, he's like an icon now, right? He's more of a he hasn't really so much make movies anymore that people want to see. It's more like, hey guys, I'm nerdy and I like to talk about nerdy things and insider Hollywood stuff. I always wear a hockey jersey, and I always curse.
Right, basically.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
That's kind of his shtick now. That's what he's for. He's kind of he's like a Comic-Con icon or something like that.
Yeah, we should all be so lucky.
Yeah, it's a great gig if you can get it.
Yes. Yes, yes. So I like you put that forward. Maybe we should take a step back because I was thinking about this in preparation for the episode. And I was thinking there are things that kind of change in nature by the fact that you get older, right? Mm-hmm. So you grow up and certain things just change, okay? I think we all know this.
Oh, sure.
But I think that this I want to distinguish that from this topic, right? Because this topic is about potentially things that you enjoyed at a different time of life, and then you get to see it from a different perspective. But it's not necessarily about you getting older. It's about the thing in itself being judged, right? Mm-hmm. As in, is that thing itself timeless? Does that thing itself have value outside of its original context in how you kind of interacted with it?
Yeah, and I think that's something that it's not necessarily just how do you personally see it. I think is in today's society.
Yes.
How can it generally be judged? One thing I think I've said a few times before. Quick example: some of the best Super Nintendo games. Where when I started making 16-bit gems, I was like, I really like these games. I think other people should play them. And sometimes I was wondering, now are these really still great games, or am I just kind of looking at them with the nostalgia goggles? And since then, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who are like in their teens, who weren't even necessarily born when these games came out. And they're like, oh man, I played this game because you were talking about it and it's really great and I love it. And I'm like, okay, good. So that
it's good
in my mind tells me that's not a nostalgia goggle thing.
Right.
Things like, Final Fantasy VI really are great games in of their own right. And they still are great games,
Yes.
Darn it.
One of the things I was going to talk about tonight, Final Fantasy VI, by the way. Yeah. And I think, it's perfectly fine. I mean, I'll throw up the next one. You ready?
Okay. All right.
So I think it's perfectly fine to say that something is timeless. You look through the nostalgia goggles, you take the nostalgia goggles off, and it's about the same, right? That's okay. It's perfectly good. I was going to ask you about Star Wars 4, 5, and 6.
Mogo just said that in the chat, and I was like, wow, we're going to have to talk about the Star Wars. That'd be a really great idea. And then, so that was just an intersection, a triforce of people having the same thought at the same time.
See, look at that. It's amazing. We're synergistic here on the Echo Screen Live.
So I've heard of them. What do you think?
I mean, here's the thing. I think there are definitive markers in that series that show it as being from a specific time. Sure. In other words, they're not timeless. It's not quite as bad as like a hairstyle of Deanna Troi at the beginning of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Which is something I wanted to quickly touch on as well, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
We'll get to it. I figured you were going to talk about that. Anyway, so there's nothing that bad necessarily in terms of being from a specific time. However, I think you could easily argue that at least 4 and 5 have a timeless quality about them. They are the most kind of, I would call, universal of the Star Wars movies. They don't just
6 too.
I probably would as well, but 6 to me is more of a nostalgia thing.
It's got some more issues with it than the other two.
It's got some more issues with it. And, it's got the cute and cuddly little Ewoks, and they kind of don't belong in the movie. It's a weird thing. Anyway, I think they hold up very well. And I think that society today, because think about, is there a franchise in the world that's more scrutinized than Star Wars? Mm-hmm. By its fan base?
Right now?
Well, I mean, even in the past decade.
The thing about more scrutinized, I think they could be more in-depth scrutinized, yes, but but the thing with Star Wars is that it has such a breadth of its fan base. It's a cultural icon. It's not just like Star Trek is like, okay, yeah, most people have heard of Star Trek. I would say not the majority of people would say that they are fans of Star Trek. I would say the majority of Americans, at least, would say, oh yeah, I like Star Wars. I would say I'm a fan of Star Wars. It's just a very broad fan base.
I think it's more of like a cultural touchstone. Everything kind of gets measured around that. And I think, the nostalgia goggles in you wants to remember. And I think this is why people do what they do. Like I bought the DVD set I bought of Star Wars. I think I mentioned this before because it has as a B-side the original unaltered theatrical release, like crappy looking blue filters and everything.
Right.
Right. But I like that. You know why? Because it's fun for me to go and watch the movies in kind of closer to the first way that I ever saw them. And that to me is something that's nostalgic, even though I think take the nostalgia goggles off. If you watch 4, 5, and 6 for the first time today, it has just as much value as it did in its time.
So I got two things to say on, or two examples, I guess you could say. Have you heard of I don't know if I talked about this. We just had our Star Wars episode last time, but that was mostly about Force Awakens.
Yes.
But did I tell you, or did I mention last week or last time about the despecialized editions? Is this something you've heard of? Or someone in the chat. That's what it was. Someone near the end of last episode mentioned it in the chat about the despecialized editions of the original trilogy.
You mean none of the special added stuff?
Yes,
none of the special editions.
But it's more than that. It's like it's a really impressive project that's been going on for something like 10 years. Where because like you said, in 2004 or something like that, the B-side DVD was released as part of the box set, here's the unaltered version, go.
Right.
And it's like, yes, it was, but it was like taken from a source, like a not great source, and the sound mixing is off and this, that,
which
and the
they did
other.
on purpose. George Lucas did that on purpose.
Yes, there's definitely still issues with that release. And then when the Blu-ray came out a few years ago, they basically just took that and upconverted it. So it's the same exact problems. So here's someone who's like, a group of people really, who took from multiple sources, like the Laserdisc release.
The Laserdisc is the definitive edition of the movie. Because
because that's the highest quality original. Like prints, that still might exist of certain parts of the movie, and like a dozen different sources, and they remix the sound so that George Lucas. What am I saying? John Williams' score doesn't get drowned out like it did.
Score.
In certain places. They took out all the special edition stuff. They color corrected it so that it actually looks right. And that's cool. All the stuff. And it is, I downloaded it. They're like 20 gig downloads. And I just like out of curiosity popped them in. Yeah. It's amazing. It's, you have never seen Star Wars like this. It's just like I remember seeing back when I first saw Star Wars in the mid-90s, when I got the VHS, except the quality is ridiculously good. It really brings you into the movie more. And you know what? Looking at it in that way, as it was originally, essentially, back in the 70s, it is still a very gripping movie. Yes, it's a little cheesy with the special effects, but that's also part of the charm.
It absolutely is.
Star Wars, especially episode 4 and episode 5, and that's another thing, it doesn't say episode 4 New Hope at the beginning of Star Wars. They redid it original how it was, but definitely still holds up, and there's a reason it's still a cultural touchstone. It's really hard to take off the glasses and say, and I said this last time as well, it's hard to take it away and say just look at it as its own critical movie and just say, I don't know anything about Star Wars, what would I think of this? It's really difficult to do that, but as much as you can, I still think you can objectively say it still holds up as a great movie.
I agree, and I think it's one of those things that definitely does hold up over time, and it's a rare exception. But I think we all have those things, right? I mean that are timeless in specific genres, and I think Star Wars will probably be one of those things that should go down as a cultural touchstone.
So going from Star Wars to Star Trek, and I specifically wanted to talk. So wait. Star Wars original trilogy, no nostalgia goggles, still great.
Nope. Yep.
Star Trek Next Generation, I believe, is both of our favorite Star Trek series. And so I was watching about a year or so ago. I watched we got off track on it, but I started I'm gonna get my girlfriend who has never really watched Star Trek at least watching Next Generation. So she can see a little bit of what I see in it.
Yeah.
Having said that, 178 episodes is a lot to ask.
Yeah.
178 hour long or 45-minute episodes is a lot to ask. So I'm like, I'm going to just still listen to like 40 or 50 essential Star Trek Next Generation episodes. And then we started watching from the beginning, skipping most of the first couple seasons, but still. And I'm like, wow, this looks a lot more dated than I remember. Yeah. You know, not just the hairstyles, especially in the early seasons with the poofy Deanna Troi hairstyles. And
oh
stuff
my
like that,
gosh,
but like the bridge of the Enterprise. Yes. I'm like, wow, the color
wood grain and carpet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wow, that carpet looks really, really dated, and the wood paneling on that console is weird.
Well, it's like, you know, it's a vision of the future, and now all of a sudden, a lot of those things kind of exist in a certain way, and you kind of go, man, it wouldn't look anything like that.
Exactly, and the pads, which are like ridiculously thick compared to iPads today, and there's like this tiny screen on it. One thing I will say is that the acoudigrams. The screen displays that pop up that many people actually would credit as influencing the smartphones we have today with the touch and the changing displays and all that. Yep. Those still look great. Michael and Denise Okuda did an amazing job with that even to this day.
And by and large, right, the technology that we have about voice assistants is by and large derived from how people use the computer in Star Trek.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Amazon Echo is like trying to be the computer from Star Trek.
Oh, I use OK Google all the time, but it becomes a little bit less dated looking when you get into Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise. I actually watched some Enterprise last night because I was like, hey, why not? It's on Netflix, and I'm like, okay, these look better, but man. Next Generation throughout its run had that slightly it's starting to stink a little bit of the 80s. And early 90s. And then having said that, there's still some really great stories and some damn fine acting in the show. But you look at some of the sci-fi that's come out in the past 15 years, such that it is. You know, like we talked about the sci-fi drought that we've been experiencing the past 10 years, but you have to also include in there things like Battlestar Galactica, even I would say maybe even Lost. And shows like that, and you're like, wow, you know, sci-fi has come a long way from this extremely episodic, everything's more or less tied up by the end, and you know nothing bad's going to happen. Although having said that, Tasha Yar did die early on, so that throws people for a loop. But
by the way, I don't know if I told you this, but Chaos on the Bridge is awesome.
Oh no, I'm glad you saw that. I know it's not a really interesting look into the first couple seasons of TNG.
It is, and what's amazing to me is just like you were saying. The other thing is it kind of reflects a different mentality. Like I recently went to Disney World, right? And if you go to the Epcot Center, the front of the Epcot Center, it's as if someone froze time and created Star Trek: The Next Generation's world.
Oh yeah.
Right there, because it's that perfect kind of era of everything's clean. And you know, it's got kind of those round shapes to it that are like long and striking. Everything's reaching for the sky. It looks like an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which was really funny to me. Which is a reason that Epcot Center, by and large, looks pretty dated today.
Oh yeah, it's almost a retro future kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of cool, and kind of the reason that I think I like to watch a lot of those Star Trek episodes. That being said. I'll think of a random one. So thank God for BBC America. They just put these episodes on, and I put them on as background noise a lot. I saw the episode where Beverly goes back to her family, right? And she has like the ghost and all this stuff. And that episode, I'm going to tell you,
it's not good.
As stylistic as it was a great setting. They did a fantastic job of capturing the feeling that they were trying to convey there. That episode blows. I mean, it's not interesting. You know, the whole time you're just sitting there going, "Is this is Star Trek? Like, what? You know, what the hell is this?" It's just not good.
No, and certainly, I think as time has gone on, especially a series like Deep Space Nine is seen in a lot more positive light because it did really break some new ground in changing not only to a more serialized version of science fiction, but also a darker one. You know, there's some episodes of Deep Space Nine that are really, really dark, especially for that time. What jumps out to me, of course, is in The Pale Moonlight, which if you've never seen it, I don't want to spoil, but I mean, that's the Garak Romulans Dominion War one, and then
Yes,
the one where
fantastic.
Nog, where not just Nog but multiple people are like stuck in an asteroid, and it's like a ground war against the Dominion. You have to see what it's like in the trenches there.
It's great.
You would never see that in Next Generation
I recently,
or the
you're
original
right.
series.
Thematically, you're 100% correct, and Deep Space Nine feels less dated for that reason. But there's still that big, and I don't know necessarily why this is. I could probably guess, but there is. I want to say it's fuzzy or blurry. So go watch it. Right? They specifically put a lot of kind of fuzz in the picture, which makes it look almost like a soap opera, as it were. It's kind of more of a dramatic kind of feel to the screen. They did it on Next Generation to a certain extent as well, but it's much more pronounced in Deep Space Nine and how they light things. And they're in a foreign station, right? I mean, it's supposed to be kind of dark, but lit kind of from the back, and things kind of glow a little bit. That makes the picture look pretty dated. But thematically, Deep Space Nine is so much more of a you're right, of a darker kind of. It's more indicative of what sci-fi would be now than Next Generation is.
And I would say, have you seen any of the newly remastered Next Generation episodes that just recently came? So they recently were released on Blu-ray.
Other than the one I saw in theaters.
Oh, there you go. But there were some recently released on Blu-ray. They were like going back to the original film stock and retouching it, recolor correcting and everything just for the Blu-ray release. And I believe that's the version that's on Netflix right now, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you might want to try some of those Next Generation episodes and see if that filter is still on there or if it looks a lot better. It should look better. But anyway, to wrap all this up, I would say I still like Next Generation quite a lot. Yeah. It's still probably my favorite series of the Star Trek series. It's starting to look a little bit dated in not only its conceits of the plot, especially in the early seasons where Picard's super hoity-toity, like, oh, well, humanity is perfect and we know exactly what we're doing.
Right.
Screw you, aliens.
In other words, the Gene Roddenberry ones.
Exactly.
Right?
Which
the plot-driven episodes versus the character-driven episodes.
Yeah. Which again, if you haven't seen Chaos on the Bridge and you're a fan of Next Generation, you should go to Netflix and watch that. But
fantastic.
It's starting to look dated in Next Generation, but it's not nearly as bad as the original series is. That is like 30 years after that came out. That was super dated in so many ways. The art direction, the plots, most of the plots. It was downright ridiculous. Yeah. In a lot of ways.
Agreed.
Next Generation has not reached that point. I don't think it'll fully get that. It'll never be that camp. At least.
You're absolutely right. But I think the first couple seasons, you can kind of just throw them out because, if my kids ever look at something like that, it's going to be like, what the? But if you go into the later seasons, I think you're right. I think it would hold up. When we start talking about the Borg and some of those other things that come in, I think that, that could stand on its own.
All right. What do you got?
So here's one. This is not necessarily a movie or a media. This is one I was going to talk about, which is arcades.
Oh, okay.
So arcades. Now, hear me out. So we all grew up where it was a special occasion. You go down to the arcade, play some quarters, right? Rock some games, have some fun. Usually in dark spaces with because that was easier to make the screens brighter so that you could see. Usually swarming with other kids or the like, right? The whole idea of the cabinets, the whole idea of the big light and sound. That's something that by and large died in this country. There are other parts of the world where it really didn't die. But I think it's kind of making almost a little bit of a comeback in maybe an altered way. So I guess my question to you is, do you have nostalgia goggles for arcades, or were they really that great?
So the first video games I ever played were actually in an arcade. I played Super Mario Brothers for like 6 months before I realized it was on a home console and that NES existed. Yep. So in a lot of ways, I have some nostalgia for arcades, but at the same time, I really enjoy arcades more nowadays, like as they exist nowadays. Right. We went to a really great arcade up in New Hampshire recently. I've been to other ones that were awesome in Portland, Oregon, even in Raleigh. There are more barcades now, if anything, and you get a really interesting mix of games. You don't have, man, this is really hard to say because, like as a kid, I would hate that because I'm like, I don't care about alcohol or anything like that. And as an adult, I'm like, this is awesome. You don't have kids running everywhere and you can have an adult beverage with some food while you're playing. You can go from asteroids to, I don't know, something brand new like Pac-Man Versus or something like that, which I know is an old game, but it's relatively new. Shut up.
Yeah.
It's based off an old game, but
it's not as old as Pac-Man.
Exactly. So a lot of people like really bemoan the death of arcades, and I bemoan more. I bemoan more than the death of arcades, the death of arcade games and arcade cabinets, and luckily, outside of museums, I think barcades are a way to keep those alive. So I'm less nostalgic for old arcades because I think they're able to be kept alive in this new form, and I think it's more sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nostalgia goggles because if I look back at that whole phenomenon, it kind of saw its day, and then it was really, I mean, I can literally in probably about 5 minutes pop up any game that I could have played back in the 90s in any arcade anywhere and have that experience. Now, it won't be the same as being in, as I just said, in the dark room with all the people running around and everything else. But, there is at least a point of reference. And, now I get to play other games that are new and have experiences that are different, right? So although I am with you, I am 100%. We have advocated for this before, the preservation of those old arcade machines, and I go and spend my hard-earned money at arcades now because I want to keep them up and running because I think they're fantastic, and I think kids should experience them. I think it's nostalgia goggles. I'm very happy with video games being a home-based thing, or as you said. Kind of spun in a new format where adults who grew up with arcades can enjoy them without. It's kind of like the way that a lot of these bowling alleys have refigured bowling. Like bowling's kind of a thing you do while you have food and drink with your friends.
Yeah.
Barcade, same kind of concept.
And because let's face it, the whole idea of an arcade, once home video gaming became a big thing, and now not even home, but mobile gaming is huge now. You don't have to go out and go to one place to play the newest games or the most exciting games anymore. That was the death knell of arcades, and they're never coming back in that form again. So to have one where they can exist. They don't exist because people put quarters in the Pong machine. They exist because people go and they spend $5 on a beer and then put a quarter in the Pong machine. If that's what it takes to keep these games alive, I'm all for that being the case now. And since I'm older, I get to enjoy it anyway. So yay.
Yeah. So anyway, I figured I wasn't sure how that one would go, but I was just thinking about something that I think I clearly enjoyed more as a child, and not just because I grew up, but because it wasn't that wonderful, which is the arcades.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I was okay, and that's again, I think most kids were okay with just going home to play their games, which is why that's what happened. So
right, and why kind of we're here. So that's cool. All right, what do you got?
Oh, well. Since I already teased it in the show notes to begin with, Crystal Pepsi.
Yeah.
How about some Crystal Pepsi? It's the thing that nerds have been, for some reason in particular, internet nerds or internet personalities have been clamoring for.
Internet personalities probably are
over 20 years.
More nostalgically bent. They have a nostalgic bent to what they do.
The internet, man, is a nostalgia machine. You can punch up almost any dang commercial from the past 50 years on YouTube, and people make good darn livings off of milking that nostalgia. You know what I like that Publix holiday commercial we saw 20 years ago. Yep. That when we were in college, you had to email the HR people from Publix and say
PR.
PR.
The director, the head of PR for the whole corporation.
You're like, hey, I remember a few years ago seeing a commercial for Publix.
It had a really great music on it.
There's a train.
That music is?
You basically said it's Publix commercial and it's got a train. What was that music?
I basically did that. I
and
don't know what my voice didn't sound anything like that.
I don't know what that was.
Yeah.
But they have to respond and be like, "Oh, that's Last Train Home by John Mulaney or whatever his name is."
Pat Metheny. Yeah,
I was so close.
Pat Metheny group. Yeah.
You know, and now you can just go Publix train commercial on YouTube, and it'll go.
Yeah, there it is. Right, you're in. It's not even a Christmas song, for Christ's sake, which is why I couldn't find it. But
No, but
anyway,
it's a good song. Anyway,
it's a great song.
Crystal Pepsi. So it was around for like a year, maybe, and then just went away. And people have been clamoring for it ever since. And now, apparently, this summer they're going to be bringing it back, at least in a limited fashion.
And I'm jumping in with both feet.
And we're both. I'm sure us and a lot of people will jump in and be like, "Oh yeah, Crystal Pepsi, great!" And I completely imagine it's going to be like, "Oh yeah, that's what it tasted like."
Yeah. All right. Well.
All right. See you later. You know, that's it. No one gets that excited about soda.
No, yeah, well, and especially soda these days, right? Soda's kind of a bad word now. You might as well be saying cigarettes, especially if you ask Tom Brady, who thinks Frosted Flakes are going to poison our children.
Hell yeah, he knows.
Anyway, so yeah, I know. You call Frosted Flakes a food like that? He says that with such disdain in his voice. Anyway,
he's a competitor. He only puts raw nerves and winning in his body.
Yes, yeah, right, and screams his name whenever he throws the football.
Tom Brady.
So, I am excited about Crystal Pepsi. I'm excited about seeing what's going to happen with this one coming back. Definitely have nostalgia for it, but I actually kind of liked it when it came out.
I did too.
Really liking the taste of it.
I
thought it was really good.
I did too. But what I'm saying is that I totally expect after 20 years of hype, it's going to be like, all right, well, that's a soda.
Yeah.
All right, that's it.
Yeah,
it's totally nostalgia goggles. If this was anything else, I don't know why. I don't know why. I think it was just fed by internet people saying, "Oh, Crystal Pepsi. Oh my God, Crystal Pepsi. Do you remember Crystal Pepsi? I remember. It was amazing. Oh my God." And that's been a feedback loop for years and years.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying it was bad. It's bad or was bad. I think it was good. It was like that.
I think it was good too.
If I remember correctly, it's like that lemon lime Pepsi. What's wrong with that? But it's not. It's totally overblown at this point, I think.
Right. Now, I will say definitively, if they brought back Dr. Smooth,
yes,
that would be a total nostalgia.
100 times out of 100, I would prefer Dr. Smooth over bringing back Crystal Pepsi.
Yes.
It was like more mellow, better tasting Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, it was. It was right.
Delicious.
Not as crisp.
Exactly. Not as
today.
bitey. Exactly. It was smoother.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I suddenly got it.
Yep.
I got it.
We figured it out. I'm Sherlock Holmes. Good night.
All right, we're actually getting long in the segment at this point. Do you got any other big hits?
So we talked about some of the video games. We talked about some of the. So I was going to talk about music. So I recently also took in a.
Yeah, I agree. The Beatles suck.
I wasn't going to talk about the Beatles. I could talk about the Beatles. The Beatles are kind of like that timeless example, but I'm not going to do that. I was going to ask about one that's kind of more recent, in the same kind of era that we would talk about for a lot of these things. So I recently saw there was a documentary, a very new documentary on Netflix about the death of Nirvana lead singer.
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain. Mm-hmm. I couldn't remember his last name for a second there. Kurt Cobain. So, forget the documentary, which is kind of lame. I was going to ask about that moment in music. Okay, so a lot of the bands that were around in the early to mid 90s who had big hits but kind of went away have come back. Like Toad the Wet Sprocket just made a new record last year. And Collective Soul just came out with a new album this year. And you go to Matchbox 20, right? Some of these bands that we're reaching for that you think have died for so long are coming back and making new albums. And I've heard some of the music, and the music's really good. So my question to you,
I always like Collective Soul.
Collective Soul. So let's go back to that moment in music. You know, early 90s music. And I'm not just talking grunge. I'm talking alternative, kind of the scene. Anything that wasn't necessarily... Someone already asked a question about this for our next portion of the program, so I'm going to get to it. But something that wasn't kind of the silky 80s kind of carryover into the 90s, like ballads and stuff, Celine Dion type stuff. Anything that wasn't that, What do you think? Does it hold up? Like, would you play that for your kids and say you should like this music? It's good, or would you look back at it and go, "Oh man, that sucks"?
Which exactly are you talking about?
Pick one. You pick one and go. Like, uh, pick something hokey. How about the Backstreet Boys?
Okay, so I was well, Backstreet Boys. I would never
Tell
say
me.
it was all that great, but
Okay, so it wasn't good, and
Well-
you think that it doesn't hold up at all. You would never want your kids to see it.
well, I would be surprised if they got excited about it.
Right.
I'm,
You wouldn't like start dancing and singing along, even though I know you
well,
know
I
the
might,
words.
I might.
Okay, yeah,
But that doesn't mean it's good. So let's break it up into some general,
okay.
time periods here, like
Categories.
80s in general. I love
Yes.
80s music. I
Yes.
really enjoy the crap out of it.
And it's
Does
hot
it-
as hell, right?
Does it hold up? Not so much. I would say a lot more 90s music holds up than 80s music.
I would have agreed with you like 10 years ago, but I completely disagree now. I just watched. So I'm gonna kind of name drop here to a certain extent, but if you ever, all right, I'm just gonna get to it. There is a. So my opinion here is that there is an entire movement in music today that is completely consumed with repackaging 80s music, and they're really, really good at it. Right?
Okay.
And I mean, not just kind of the chiptune kind of, Kavinsky, Love Fox kind of thing. Like I'm talking like
Ted Kaczynski?
no. It's a group gosh, this is meandering now. Sorry, I'm gonna skip. I'm gonna skip.
This is
some
what
of that.
happens when you get
Yeah.
into music.
Look up the song Testarossa Overdrive. You're gonna know exactly what I'm talking
Okay.
about. Anyway, it's sweet. It's awesome. It's new music, but it's so totally 80s. But there's so much 80s influence in pop today that 80s music doesn't seem nearly as jarring as it did 10 years ago.
Okay, I'd say that.
80s
That's
music
true.
is all over pop music. Like if you turn on pop radio right now, which I don't listen to at all the hip hop artists, all the rap artists, all the rock artists, I mean, almost everybody.
There's not much
Taylor
rock
Swift,
that's
right?
super popular
It's-
anymore.
It's all like 80s music just repackaged.
That's true. Taylor Swift is, yeah, and Katy Perry also has a few songs that obviously
again,
hit off
right?
the 80s.
It's all 80. I mean, like freaking, listen to "Hot and Cold," for example, by Katy Perry. That is a remix of a Cars song.
I was also
That
going to say
that is a Cars song.
yeah, that's true. I was also going to say Last Friday Night is like so obviously 80s influence.
Exactly. So my point is, the 80s music seems less dated because of the cultural context we
That's a
live in
good
now.
point. Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But 90s music is almost more jarring. Listen to "Smells
Really?
Like Teen Spirit." Listen to "Smells Like Teen Spirit." You can play that on almost any radio station now because it's kind of crazy. You can play it on a classic rock station. I've heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on a classic rock station. So they can play "Smells Like Teen Spirit." You can play it on almost any kind of radio station, and everybody goes, "This song is freaking great," right? It just holds up really, really well. Go and play. I'm trying to think of something that's an analog of "Smells Like Teen Spirit" that was from the same era. Go and play something like "Garbage."
Ice Ice
the
Baby?
group Garbage. No. I'm talking about an analog from grunge.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was
Like-
okay, Garbage.
Yeah, Garbage. Like if you heard Garbage on the radio today, you'd kind of be like, I don't know. Like this doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Because
Soundgarden.
you're old and working for the man.
No, I just that probably is true. But my point is, if I were going to put forward an example, I'd put forward "Smells Like Teen Spirit." But I think if you looked around "Smells Like Teen Spirit" is not indicative of everything that was released around it. So that all the music that was released around it sounds more jarring to me today because music doesn't sound anything like that. It's weird. It's a really weird thing.
Yeah, this is very subjective, I think.
It is.
It-
But that's okay. There are
it's-
there are things that can be more nostalgic driven than others.
Yeah,
right?
I think. Oh man, if we're going into like region or time periods, 50s is obviously very dated. There's some classic music from the 60s and 70s. I would say some of the heavier drug influence songs
Oh yeah.
don't hold up at all.
No.
Frankly, it's something that nowadays you look at and like, they were high or worse, and you can tell.
It's funny because I think the way that the 80s was so out when you and I were in high school, I think that's the way people look at like the 70s now. Like the 70s looks awful.
Yeah.
It just like, and the 70s is one of the greatest decades of music of all time.
We're pissing some people off here.
No. Listen, it's one of the best. It's one of the best decades of music of all time. The 70s is, no question.
It's got some of the best stuff, but it's got some real garbage. Yeah.
Oh my God. And the look and feel of all that stuff, like people look back at that now, they're just like, oh my God.
Which is what people said about the 80s for the longest time, but you're right. I think in general the 80s is now looked at more kindly than it has been.
I know. There is my favorite.
And there's some really great stuff from the 80s too, like Talking Heads.
Yes.
Which was
my favorite. If you have not listened to Hurry Up, We're Dreaming, which is the album from a few years ago from a group, which is really just a guide called M83.
Uh-huh. I was going to bring them up, actually.
Absolutely have to listen to it. M83 is probably one of my favorite things in the world right now. And it's basically really, really great contemporary music that has a tremendous 80s influence. And in some of the interviews I've heard with the guy, I can't remember his name. He has a name I can't remember for some reason right now. Anyway, he talks about how the 80s was such an amazing decade for music. Mm-hmm. And how he's just kind of distilling a lot of that into some of the things that he does. And I felt so vindicated because even when you and I were in college, I was in a music fraternity, right? People were like, "Oh my God, the 80s was such a terrible, decade for music." And now I just sit here and laugh because it's like, the 80s are so heavily appreciated.
Vindication. I will say, and actually some people in the chat already said this, the 2000s, I think specifically the later 2000s and early 2010s there was a bit of a wasteland of club music.
It became club music.
That's all it was. And that is not, it already doesn't hold up at all.
No, I completely agree.
That's not going to work. There was some.
How does Pitbull still make money? Can somebody tell me this?
There was some really good music in the early 2000s, I think.
Britney Spears, for example. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, not at all, not Train at all. But why Train pop in my head?
Trains.
No.
Train is great music.
I hate you.
Why? What's wrong with Train?
No. The Killers.
The Killers.
Good stuff.
Killers. Awesome.
Awesome. That might be not Sam's Town. Was Sam's Town?
Sam's Town. Sam's Town was the American follow-up to Hot Fuss.
Hot Fuss is what I'm thinking of. Was I think the last album that I really liked top to bottom.
Oh, it's just it's flawless.
So
flawless.
Anyway,
Hurry Up, We're Dreaming, flawless, top to bottom. It's a double album, flawless, top to bottom.
There you go.
Okay,
all right.
So
we went off. Anyway, good. Good.
Yeah, I don't know that we necessarily figured. Maybe we should do a few more of these where we just bring in other stuff.
Yeah, we did not come to any conclusions on the music one.
No, but that's okay. That's right. This is good. I smell a new series coming to the Echo Screen Live where potentially we could do editions of Nostalgia Goggles where we are better prepared.
Yeah, Nostalgia Goggles 2.0.
Yeah, to talk about some of the things that we've just remembered. For example, I watched an episode on talk about the internet nostalgia. I watched an episode of Beekman's World the other day on YouTube.
Beekman's World holds up
because I wanted to see if it held up as compared to Bill Nye the Science Guy, and it's definitely more of a kiddie show than I remember. And I'm going to say it's Nostalgia Goggles.
I completely disagree. I think Beekman's World holds up better than Bill Nye the Science Guy nowadays.
Oh, I didn't say that. I didn't say it didn't hold up because I haven't watched Bill Nye the Science Guy in a while. I'm sure I would say the same exact things about Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Beekman's World I think holds up better mostly because of the semi-absurdist humor, which is really big nowadays. And like you got a guy breaking the fourth wall, sometimes figurative, sometimes literally and figuratively, talking about how he's a guy in a rat suit.
Yes.
It's pretty funny. He's pretty good.
He's a Shakespearean actor who's just looking for work, but now he's playing a guy in a rat suit.
It's pretty good. It
is. It's really funny.
And high energy.
And the only reason I thought of this was because there was some 90s movie on. Oh, you know what it was? It was the Brady movie. The Very Brady movie.
Yeah.
Which now looks horrendously dated, by the way. But anyway, because it's a movie about the 70s. Anyway.
That's true. Poking fun at how dated the 70s were.
the lesbian friend of Marcia
Yeah.
in that movie is Josie.
It's Josie
From Beekman's World.
Exactly.
So I was watching it, and I was like, oh my God, it's Josie. So I had, and of course, my wife had no idea what I was talking about because she didn't know what Beekman's World was. So I had to go
Lester the Rat.
show her. Anyway, all right.
Okay, so before we move on to the Q&A portion and you give that whole spiel, someone mentioned earlier Tab when we were talking about sodas. I just want to bring this up because I think it's one.
Tab was never good.
No. Tab's awful. But
Tab is
one
awful.
of the most perfect things I've ever seen brought to a theme party. So for Back to the Future Day, October 21st, 2015, which is when they travel to Back to the Future Part 2, I might have even brought this up when we had the show around that time, but I went to a party because I had a friend, well, it's a party, really a small gathering, because I have a friend whose girlfriend had never seen any of the Back to the Future movies. And we're like, well, we're watching them, at least the first two. So buckle up, buckaroo. And
Buckle up, buckaroo.
So I go there after work, and we're getting ready to watch it, and someone comes by, and he brings a case of Tab. How perfect is that?
That is pretty good.
It's pretty good, except the Tab. I mean, Tab's awful. I'll drink it, but Tab was the first diet soda, and it tastes like it.
Yeah.
I went to a viewing of the football games this past weekend, watching the Patriots dominate, and that same friend, and he still had some Tab left. So I was like, fine, I'll drink some. And I was drinking it, and someone else was like, they still make Tab? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what does it taste like? Aspartame.
Yeah.
That's basically the flavor of Tab. But anyway.
Yeah. It totally is.
Okay.
All right. So we are now going to. I like this idea of doing the nostalgia goggles part 2. We'll figure that out. Now we get to the third portion of the program, which is the question answer portion, where we will answer questions that you guys ask live, or even if you just asked me like a couple weeks ago and I never got to it, maybe I'll dig it up.
Maybe.
And we'll answer them live on the air, even if we don't ask them live. So, how do you ask questions, you may ask? Well,
how do you ask questions?
Just ask a question. You just did. Why are you asking me such a ridiculous question?
I know, you already asked it. What more do you want?
I know, exactly. What are you trying to do here? All you have to do is, if you're following along in the chat with us, all you have to do is send me a private message. My name over there in the chat is Commodore128, in case you couldn't figure it out. You can also tweet at It's the Commodore. We've got a lot of questions already, so we're off to a pretty good start. But if you have questions about the topic du jour, nostalgia goggles, or if you have questions about some of the things we talked about in the news and notes, the tids and bits, that's fine. Or if you have a question about literally almost anything else, we'll be glad to take it.
Linsanity, football,
if you have a question about Linsanity,
championship playoffs coming.
Football championship playoffs, whatever it may be. All right, you ready to rock?
The sports ball? Yeah.
All right, Lupacillo asks, now that you own a Wii U and the honeymoon period is over, which honeymoon period are we talking about here? How does it compare to your previous expectations, if any?
That's a good question.
Great question.
Well,
do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Oh, I thought this was more on you, but yeah.
Well, it is, but I mean, you own a Wii U and the honeymoon period's over, so.
Oh, you go first.
Talk about all right, so
you probably can guess what I'm going to say.
All right, the Wii U is slow. The Wii U is ill-conceived in some ways with the controller, but every game that I've played so far for the Wii U is incredibly fun, and in many ways, it uses the technology very, very well. It has a tough time, breaking away from novelty in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, in the case of like Smash Brothers and Mario Kart 8, these are great games. I would call them great games. I wouldn't call them good games. I'd call them great games. They're great installations in their franchises, and the Wii U does them very well. I just wish the damn thing could load in something other, than like 3 minutes. Anyway, those are my, and I think it in other words, it met my expectations perfectly well, because I was not expecting to get a PS4, right?
Right.
I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I got a Wii U because it's it's the console I wanted because I knew it was going to have the most games I wanted to play. I still don't have a real hard driving reason to get a PS4 or an Xbox One. But the games on Wii U I've really enjoyed when I have time to play them. I did get Mario Maker for Christmas,
nice.
And it's a great game. It really brilliant, just so finely polished. That's what I love about Nintendo games. They're so finely polished, and it uses the gamepad in a perfect way, more than any other game. I just wish I had more time to go into it. But yeah, I mean, for what it does, I think it does it really well. It plays some really fun games. It's not gonna have a library that knocks your socks off with like 50 games that are must plays, but what it does have is really good.
Yeah, I agree. I've been pleased. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. Good friend of the program, Psychopather, asks, upon the recent success of Hamilton.
Ha ha! Thought we were going to get away from. Oh man, I was good. Oh, before we even go, I forgot to talk about.
I'm gonna finish the question because I'm not gonna let you.
I forgot to talk about musicals today.
Style/biography mismatch would you like to see come to Broadway?
So Hamilton, if you don't know, is like the hit musical on Broadway. I'm sure it's going to win all the awards. It is a hip hop telling of the story of Alexander Hamilton.
It just sounds so awful.
It's good. It's so good. Anyway, what would be a great mismatch? You could get really offensive if you thought about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is like the when Mel Brooks made The History of the World and it was like Hitler on Ice.
I was actually going to say The Producers, which was already on Broadway. You got Springtime for Hitler. What more do you like? That's Mel Brooks. We already had our Mel Brooks episode.
Hey, they're finally making Spaceballs, the sequel.
Oh, I was going to say they already made Spaceballs. Are they actually making Spaceballs, the sequel?
Pretty sure. I read that the other day.
I've heard, rumors about it for years, but.
Oh no, I know.
I think you should answer the question while I look this up. You and your spurless rumors.
Who's the best mismatch? It's tough to beat hip hop with Hamilton, I guess.
Because who would ever think of that?
So it's so kind of disjointed. Maybe well, the other thing is musicals are really only lend themselves to certain kinds of music. Like it's really hard to.
Oh.
I mean, musicals are their own form, and uniquely American in many ways form of music.
That's a very good point.
And so, like secondary to jazz, is kind of musicals. I had this conversation with an ex-girlfriend who happened to be pretty oriented toward the theater.
Wait,
and
so she would just sit around and pretend? That's lame. Oh, you fell.
I'm sorry
there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think the theater is unique, and it only lends itself well to certain forms of music. Hip hop is one of them, so that works. But you couldn't do a death metal musical.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
You know what I mean?
Well, what if it was a death metal musical of
the life of
George Washington Carver? There you go. I'm done.
It's interesting. I'll give you that. We got a movie.
We got some peanuts.
I don't think I could do that.
All right. Next question.
Yeah, I don't think I could handle that.
Or a barbershop quartet. The story of Genghis Khan would be pretty good too.
I could dig that.
I've seen a barbershop quartet musical. It's Forever Plaid.
Yeah, that would work. I mean, again, it's there. It's vocal. It makes sense.
Flat Rock Playhouse. I want to see some. Oh man, Music Man was good. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Music Man. All right. So Tanner asks, with all the spin-off media surrounding Final Fantasy VII, why do you think Square Enix hasn't touched Final Fantasy VI?
Man, that's a really weird question. I think
should they?
I'd like them to, honestly.
Yeah, I know. We disagree on this.
I want them to touch it.
Why? We agree about why they haven't touched it.
Do we agree? Why haven't they touched it?
they're really, really worried about doing this one right,
I don't think that's
as
the
opposed
case.
to Final Fantasy IV, which they've done 100 times, and
I disagree.
Final Fantasy V, whatever.
I think Square Enix has lost its way for quite a while.
Yeah,
They didn't know what to do or how to make money or anything.
yeah,
At least the Square portion. Enix seems to just be fine with its the Enix side with its Dragon Quest seems to still be doing perfectly fine as it always was, if not better.
sure.
But
Yep.
Final Fantasy has been rough for about a decade or so, for various reasons. And then only recently, after so much clamoring, have they gotten to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I
Yep.
think that they finally were like, oh, okay. Oh, people want a really well done from the ground up remake. Okay, let's do that. Of course they're going to do Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is the most popular thing in the franchise.
Totally.
Having said that, maybe after they do 7, they'll be like, oh, okay, now let's try 6. I mean, I would never rule that out. I just think that in this case, if I had to guess, if there's one game they have to throw all the resources behind into remaking, it would be 7, because for obvious reasons.
Right. No, I agree with that. I think where we disagree is the should they, because I think you leave well enough alone to a certain extent.
I'd like to see a remake. I think it'd be interesting.
I mean, I've seen them wreck a lot of. The thing is, the only reason why I think should they could be turned to a yes is because I've seen them remake, like some of the stuff they've done with 4 is actually pretty good. If they don't, if they could find a way to make it. The issue is that Final Fantasy, all the old Final Fantasies on Super Nintendo are very well catered and suited toward the Super Nintendo. How do you make an opera scene in a new? We've talked about this several times on a new system. It would be almost impossible. You would have to hire someone to completely rewrite everything that happens in that sequence.
Oh yeah, that's why it would be difficult. And also, I'd say 3DS.
You think Final Fantasy 6 on 3DS?
Well, I mean, they remade Final Fantasy 4 and Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6.
Which was great.
And now they're doing 7 and 8, and it's all going to be on the DS or 3DS. I mean, by the way, Dragon Quest 7 comes out on 3DS this summer. Super excited for that. I mean, they've just done a very great job with that, Square Enix has. That's the format I think it would work best on. With Final
I
Fantasy
think you're probably
6.
right, because they get away with a lot of that stuff, because you could still. You're still looking at a couple of 2-inch screens, right? It's not. I think they can do pretty well with that. I agree. Maybe just keeping it there wouldn't be so bad. I just always had this image of playing those games on a big screen TV and being really disappointed because it's terrible. It's like, I don't know. It's tough. I just don't. I can't see that going well. How about this one? Red Mage asks, have you or Rue tried any of the legacy style board games like Risk Legacy or Pandemic Legacy? Games that require players to permanently change their game by destroying cards and marking the game boards. Do you have any feelings on those tabletop experiences that have a limited lifespan?
I was just talking about this with someone literally a few days ago.
Sub question, do you think there will be a place for this in video gaming?
Ooh.
I mean,
that's interesting. I mean, okay, well, first part of the question. I like the idea. I have not played any of them. I would like to. I think it suits itself extraordinarily well for, I think, the way adults do play board games for the most part nowadays, which is in a recurring gaming group.
Yes.
So if you are playing Risk Legacy and you name one area Poopton, you can get to it next time you play it 2 weeks later and be like, haha, this place is Poopton. I remember that.
Yeah.
Good times, right? I think that works really well. And it's kind of brilliant because it brings new and interesting game mechanics to otherwise dated board games. Even Pandemic is kind of dated by this point. Yeah. And makes it more interesting. Meanwhile, the game company's like, cool, after these guys played this game 10 times, they got to buy another one. Booyah, money. Having said that, in terms of video games, did you ever play the web game? I think it's called One Time. Someone in the chat's going to correct me. I'm going to look this up really quickly, but it's something like that. It was on Newgrounds, I think.
No.
One Chance game. Is that it? Yep. One Chance. Okay, you should play it. It's a Flash game. Not to give too much away. It'll be short. It'll take you like no more than 10 minutes.
Oh, that's good.
But basically, the idea is, you are a scientist, and there's this outbreak that's going to kill everyone in the planet in like 3 days or something like that.
Okay.
I'm going off from memory. I haven't played this in years. And you have a series of choices to make on what you're going to do. Like, well, do you go to, okay, it's like 2 days left until everyone dies. Do you go to the lab and try to fix it? Mm-hmm. Or do you spend time with your son now that your wife has died? Or something like that, and you have a series of choices to make. When you get to the end, it gives you an ending. It's a multiple ending game.
Wow.
But you cannot replay it. It saves your IP address and your cookies and all that stuff, and it's like, all right, no, you already played this game. That's it. That is your one. Over. That is your one chance. Now there's ways around it. You can clear cookies and whatever if you really want to cheat. But the idea, the conceit is really interesting. I don't know if I've seen that in any other games. If anyone in the chat knows, please say so. But I like that. I like that sense of permanency.
It reminds me of the USB stick Minecraft World Project we heard about years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Didn't What's-Her-Face talk about that?
Play a little bit, save the world, pop it out, send it to somebody random. They play the game a little bit. And, of course, obviously everything is saved. So it's almost like generations of people are living in the same place over time and kind of live in the ruins of what was built by the people before them, which is really cool. I thought that was a great idea.
It's a really interesting idea, and not, I think, something that's done enough in gaming.
And so I guess the answer for both of us is a resounding yes. There's a great space for this in video gaming. I think, like most things, it's hard to figure out how that's going to work. I like
how to do it so you don't piss off a bunch of people who don't know better, and they're like, buy this game and they're like, what? I can only do this once. What's up with this? Blah blah blah.
Yeah. I don't know. You're right. That's a tough one to deal with. Ford Prefect asks, what, if anything, is on your reading list now that you're caught up on Ice and Fire?
Ooh, reading list. That's a good one. I don't get to read as much as I would like. But I did read The Martian before I saw the movie. I like both quite a bit. Did you see The Martian?
I haven't seen it yet. It's definitely on the list.
You should see it. It's interesting. It's up for so many Oscars. I wasn't fully expecting that. And at first, when I was like, Matt Damon for The Martian, I was like, and then I thought about it, like, actually, he really did kind of carry that movie. I mean, it's basically him for most of it, which makes sense. Yeah. But anyway,
Saving Private Ryan on Mars.
Kind of. But it's. Did you see this thing someone put together? It's kind of full of a lot of bunk numbers, but basically the idea, like, how much have movies spent trying to rescue Matt Damon, like like across all these movies, from like Saving Private Ryan to The Martian to like Interstellar to this, that, and the other. And it's just like a ridiculous amount of money that's been spent to save Matt Damon. It's really funny.
Somebody please think of Matt Damon.
But The Martian was a really good book. I liked it better than the movie, I think, even.
Yeah.
What else have I read? Is that it?
What's on the list, though?
What's on the list? I already read Ready Player One. That was okay. You know what I want to read? Books.
What? Oh, see?
No, I was gonna say 11/23/63, which is like, it's been out for a little while, but it hasn't really gone on sale that I can see. It's just one of the more recent Stephen King novels. It's not so much a horror story in the terms of classic Stephen King, but it's about this guy who can like travel back in time, and he keeps trying to stop Kennedy from being assassinated. But there's like some twist that keeps happening. I can't remember exactly. I read a synopsis at one point. It sounded really interesting.
Nice.
Anyway, what's on your reading list?
I have the biography, the autobiography of Billy Idol, which I've heard is really good, and he is like a no holds barred, so that's going to be interesting. I actually have that on the bookshelf behind me. I am currently reading The Plantagenets, as I think I had mentioned before, because I was in such a desperate history kind of mode after Song of Ice and Fire was over. I also have the sequel to that book, which is called The War of the Roses,
Man,
written by the same author.
You're a giant nerd.
I also really want to read Leviathan Wakes, which is the basis for the show The Expanse.
Okay.
I have heard tremendous things about the novel. The show so far is kind of lukewarm to me. It's cool. It's good. I'm not gonna say it's bad, but it's not amazing. But I heard the novel is just phenomenal. So maybe there's some room for me to go read that sucker.
All right.
So that's the reading list.
The Clan of the Grey Wolf Book Club.
Yeah, exactly.
Done.
And hated it. Okay, let's see. Mogo, who is your favorite stand-up comic?
Ooh. All right. Well, I feel we might have gotten this one a while ago. But
Yeah, I think we did too.
it changed for me recently.
Like of all time?
Or the one I'm really on right now is John Mulaney, who I accidentally said a little while ago.
Yeah.
Which, have you heard him?
Yes.
Okay, hilarious. Just really good.
He's very, very good.
He's excellent. His jokes are really good, but his stories and the way his delivery is astoundingly good.
Which is when it really comes down, you start to realize that's what's more funny than anything else.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the joke. It's kind of the way people tell jokes that's funny.
That is comedy, really. It's all about the delivery and the timing. It's like
my favorite comedian is a guy named Brian Regan.
Oh yeah, I like Brian Regan too.
Brian Regan, I don't know what it is. The way that he like contorts his face. You talk about the delivery. And he's also, and I know this is going to make me sound really curmudgeonly, but he's also kind of a clean comic. It's not all clean.
You are so curmudgeon.
Yeah, I know, but I like that. You know, it's kind of a departure because almost every stand-up comedian you see today is just like, you know, it's like playing Grand Theft Auto 5.
Well, I remember we both used to really like early George Carlin before he got super curmudgeonly in his old age.
Yes, I do. I like George Carlin a lot. I'll tell you, and this is going to make me really unpopular. You know, Bill Cosby has the best stand-up comedy I have ever watched, and I'm talking about like himself.
Bill Cosby himself is probably one of the best stand-up specials ever.
I could watch that right now and still laugh, even though I know I'm watching.
And it's like 40 years old.
Bill Cosby, right? Yeah. But especially now, because now I have a family and I have my own child, so it's kind of like, hey, all that stuff that I just laughed at before, and I was like, ha ha ha, that's funny. Yeah, we do that as a family. Like now I get to see it from another angle. So
yeah, I do also like Jim Gaffigan quite a bit. I feel he's got. I don't like his new stuff as much. It seems like it's starting to repeat a lot, but he's generally pretty funny too. Anyway,
I like Jim Gaffigan.
Lots of really great comics out there.
Morgan asks, "What's your favorite middle of the road game?" I guess Morgan means
middle of the road,
tepid. Like maybe it's not such a great game, but you still like it. Is that how you'd interpret that?
We
question?
can take it that way, if you would like.
Yeah, let's do that. What?
Sorry, TV's Mr. Neil finished the long-awaited Clan of the Grey Wolf fan art that I've been presenting at the beginning and end of every broadcast.
Oh, fantastic!
It's pretty good. I'm going to be going to share this real quick. I'm going to completely, sidetrack the question for a moment just to show this off. You have blonde hair for some reason. I guess you do.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't have blonde hair.
Well, yeah, but compared to my dark hair, I can see that. You got a very light brown, so I'll take it. But my favorite is Cooper.
That is pretty good.
So thank you very much for that, Neil. That's awesome. I'm going to have to swap that out for the next episode. Saved. Anyway, I'm sorry. The question, I
enjoy that.
Yes.
What's your favorite middle of the road game?
Oh, man.
I like a game that's not necessarily universally liked. It's just something that you happen to like, that you enjoyed. A lot of them we've mentioned in the show before. Like I would say something like, what was the Star Trek RTS?
Oh, Armada.
Yeah, Star Trek Armada.
I liked Armada quite a bit. I played
solid,
a lot of that.
Good, solid RTS game. Not the best you're ever going to play. Not a defining part of the genre, but it's fun.
I'm going to go with a couple of early PS2 games, early on in the console's lifetime, which is mostly ignoble rogues gallery of games. But I remember playing them both at your house when you guys got a PS2, because you got it way before I did. But Dark Cloud, which I've mentioned before, which is like Level 5's first game.
Excellent choice.
It's a very good game. But you know what else? Shadow of Destiny, which is like this no-name game. Remember, it was like all voice acted, and it was really more of a puzzle game than anything else. You're this guy who keeps dying, and but then there's like this homunculus who takes you back like an hour before you die each time. Like, well, no, you need to figure out how to stop yourself from dying this time. Do you remember what I'm talking about now? Vaguely. I like that game more than I probably should have, but the time travel mechanic really got me. It's that, you know what, this is probably one of those games that has some serious nostalgia goggles, because it was it was a new experience for me, you know.
So Morgan just clarified, not a AAA game or an indie title.
Okay, so we went with that.
Yeah. So we kind of missed it, but that's okay. Here's one I love. Broccolope asks, would you call yourself a Michael Bolton fan?
Is that quoting something, or is that a real question?
No, that's a real question.
I actually like Michael Bolton.
Yeah.
I mean, he's fine.
He's all right.
His best work is in The Lonely Island, Jack Sparrow.
So you're right. All the Lonely Island stuff is actually still really, really good. It holds up. You know, I would say Michael Bolton's one of those. Like, I liked when he was like, he just randomly shows up in a Honda Christmas commercial. I thought that was pretty funny. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, it's Michael Bolton.
He's
like,
self-aware and he has fun with it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know?
The other thing is, you know, because he wasn't in The Office, but Michael Bolton was in The Office. I think that's pretty funny. Was the Office Space. Office Space.
The Office Space.
I don't know why I just said that. Office Space. You know, I probably wouldn't say I was a Michael Bolton fan, but you know, that whole like movement of music in the early 90s that was like what grunge was revolting against was Michael Bolton, basically.
Oh yeah.
Michael Bolton, Celine Dion. What was that? Well, anyway, I don't want to get into it. All those crazy, like really mellow ballad kind of people. I can't imagine that being popular now. Like, I just cannot imagine that being popular at all. It's amazing that there was a certain time in history when that was really popular. No wonder Kurt Cobain was so agitated. Here we go. Anton asks, I joined a D&D campaign and decided on a human monk. I don't know what his backstory is. Next session is this Saturday. Thoughts?
I don't know about a backstory, but I will tell you that for a short time before he got killed in unceremoniously.
Okay.
No, completely not.
Okay.
In my weekly D&D sessions that I have that sometimes happen, I was playing a monk. Yeah. His name was Kick Panche.
Okay.
K-I-K. Paunche with a little accent mark.
Right. Yes.
And he liked to
make it fancy.
Yeah, and he liked to both kick and punch.
Kick, punch, or remember.
That's really all that there was to his story.
Okay. Well, I think he is. I don't know if it's a he. The monk was abandoned at birth, left at a monastery where he was taught the ways of martial arts, and has a penchant for buggery. No, I don't know.
Run with it. Go for it.
Yeah, you know, I might as well keep going, right? I don't know. I gave my contribution. I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
I already did. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I got.
All right.
Do we got any lightning round questions, since we're coming up on like 90 minutes?
We actually have some really deep questions, which is really tough.
Oh, darn it. You could save them for next time, too.
I know. Well, these are going to be hard to save. I can find one.
Okay.
I can find one. Let's do some rapid fire stuff here. Okay.
I like the deep ones, too. Just make sure you save them.
Well, I mean, on the Twitter, they're saved for forever.
Or until Twitter shuts down. I don't know.
Right, or until Twitter goes out of business, which could potentially happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. Or in like 2 years. Who knows?
Okay, how about this one? We actually already answered that question on another show. Sorry. You already answered the concept of, have you ever played Mario Maker and what your thoughts after you played it? You already talked about that.
Boom,
You
done.
talked about how much you love it. Yeah, it's great. Let's see here. Natimus asks, have you ever played Police Knots? And if so, would you recommend it?
I have not played Police Knots, but I've heard John D'Elia from RetroWare expound on it quite a bit. Especially if you're a fan of Kojima. Mm-hmm. He did do Police Knots, I believe. Oh, man, I threw myself off there. I'd say go for it. If you like those kind of maybe a little too deep and meandery Japanese type games, sure.
Mm-hmm. Someone who is anonymously jumping in from the chat on the website asks, hey, Rue, which do you like better, Soul Blazer or Illusion of Gaia?
Illusion of Gaia. That's not even hard.
Yeah, Illusion of Gaia is a great game.
Soul Blazer's got a lot of interesting things going on, but it's a very raw game. The harder question would be Terranigma versus Illusion of Gaia, and I might actually no, I would say Terranigma. That's an awesome game that never came out here, but anyway.
All right, and just because I can't let it go without asking this question because it has to happen. Gizmo asks, speaking of nostalgia glasses, what do you think about Pauly Shore's resurgence to the limelight with Surge ads?
What? Is this a thing? Seriously?
It's a thing. It's a thing. First of all, the Pauly Shore episode of Futurama is pretty hilarious too.
I hate Pauly Shore so much.
I hate Pauly Shore so much, and every Pauly Shore movie I think I've ever seen is not just bad. It would not hold up for any amount of time.
It didn't hold up then.
That's right. It was just terrible. They're just terrible. So any excuse to bring Pauly Shore back into the limelight is probably bad for me. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say it's bad.
Fair enough.
Nostalgia glasses all the way. Okay, buddy. Well, Guy, Fran.
This party died.
Canadians. You have yet again spent your time looking at us just talk and meander for another 90 minutes, despite our best efforts to shorten the program. So,
well, despite someone's best efforts to shorten the program.
Hey,
just saying.
I played along.
Well, this is not 2 hours. Good job.
I try not to talk about Kurt Cobain too long. Anyway, folks, thank you for hanging out with us this evening to talk about some of the nostalgia glasses. I have a funny feeling, as we said before, that we will see that once again in the near future.
Boom.
So if you have any ideas about what we should talk about the next time we talk about nostalgia glasses, or if you have any other ideas for the program that you'd like to see us do as topics, please let us know. Any kind of amount of geekery will do.
Hey.
You already know where to tweet at me, at It's the Commodore. If you'd like to tweet at Rue, you can find him.
Any dream will do. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
No.
Sick reference, bro.
I'm speechless.
Rue _ COTGW. There you go.
I was about to say, fine. People won't know where to go for you. And that'll be that. Until we see you guys next time. By the way, we are a bi-weekly podcast now. So you'll find us not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after next Wednesday. You have any idea what day that is, Rue?
That'll be the Wednesday before Super Bowl Sunday.
Hey!
Where your New England Patriots will take on the Carolina Panthers.
Where we will do a retrospective on all football sports games.
A retrospective of Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback to ever play football.
Only second to Larry Bird, who was the greatest at everything ever, apparently.
Larry Bird and Todd Larry
Bird.
And I'm falling apart here.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anyway.
Hey, I mean, look,
abort.
I don't know what to tell you.
Eject.
My lights are flickering, which probably means my power is going to go off. So before that happens, folks, we should probably sign off here.
Getting that half inch of snow already?
This is there's only 3 or 4 inches still left on the ground, so it's probably only
Snowpocalypse, guys.
snowpocalypse. It's coming. Hey, well, you'll see us after the recovery. Given the fact that there might be actually internet access after snowpocalypse, by the way, all this is contingent upon that fact.
That's true.
Anyway, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. We really do appreciate it. We really do enjoy doing the Echo Screen Live, the official podcast of the Clan of the Grey Wolf. We love having user interaction from folks just like yourself. So thank you for hanging out. Even if you think I'm crazy and don't know what I'm talking about, or if you happen to just think that meandering is fun and you like to see what we have to do. So, all right, folks, until next time.
Kind of like that sentence.
For Rue. Yeah, for Rue. I am the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and there is no reset button.
Any dream will do. Joseph.
Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.com. Donnie Osmond.
Talking about. All right, Cooper. So I got an important question for you. Of all the catnips that you have had, would you say that they are all pretty good? They hold up nowadays, or do you got some kitty nostalgia glasses with those? What do you think? Really?
Oh,
are you sure? What about
surprising.
What about your little jingle ball? Does that hold up pretty well? Yeah. Yeah, he says that one does. So, so if you all have cats out there, and I know you all do, just remember jingle balls hold up really well, but the catnip, that's just ephemeral, man.
Jingle balls, jingle all the way.
.com.